Welcome to the audio commentary for Paul Linney's The Cat and the Canary. I'm David Del Val, author and film historian, and I'm joined on this track by the wonderful Randy Haberkamp, who is an aficionado par excellence of the silent cinema and a film historian in his own right. Randy, thank you so much for joining me on what must be a Kevin Brownlow kind of influenced film because of the credits with photoplay, and there's the Universal.
Definitely. And I love this plane going around the world for Universal.
It glitters in the 40s and the late 30s. And then the one after this, you get Carl Laemmle in the middle of it, which is hilarious.
Exactly. And this is something that tells us we're in the hands of a real visual stylist with these really specially designed credits. I just love it. This didn't happen that often in the silent era. Usually it was kind of a standard logo type thing, but this tells us that we're being taken from frame one, and I
to
really
a
love
ghostly
that.
place.
Yes.
And this particular kind of titling, in 1935, they used a similar thing in Karl Freund's Hands of Orlok, Mad Love. And then in 1943, Universal used it again in Son of Dracula, which is an underrated Robert Siodmak masterpiece, I think, of the 40s Universal horror output. And Paul Linney, we must talk a lot about him, Randy, because this movie and his very short but interesting career is filled with innovative camera angles and just a fabulous sense of imagination and the Germanic expressionism that kind of dazzled him in Germany.
Well, and I think that comes from the fact that he really started more as an artist and started primarily as an art director for films when he began film work. He did direct some fairly he'd go off and on, but it's his visual style that really, I think, is so unique, and his attention to the every detail of a frame is from that background. And he even went into animation, which is another thing that I think makes him unique in some of the early films. See, look at this. This is clearly a drawing, not meant to be realistic.
Well, there's nothing like this on the Hudson River, folks. Let me tell you that right now. But you can see he manages, even in an American film, to bring German expressionism around. That castle is right out of Nosferatu.
Yes.
And the brilliant idea of having the castle morph into these medicine bottles, where we then see the cats that surround the Canary, which is Cyrus West. And you also get the impression, because there could be medical bottles, that he might be poisoned. His death is not necessarily accidental or because of old age. That's just marvelous. And it brings the imagery of the cat right into it. And that imagery is even continued in the headlights of cars that are seen in the darkness.
And this is from the silent era, when you needed to pay attention to what was happening on the screen, because that was the main way of telling the story. You didn't hear the dialogue. You might have seen some words like this title here or this letter, but at the same time, you need, in order to get the true feeling of it, you needed those bottles, you needed those cats, and you needed to understand what was going on visually and how the mood is being set for you. Just with images. And here comes the hand.
The kind of a claw-like werewolf Catman kind of hand. But once again, we were talking about, and we will go into more detail about the First World War and its influence, not on just culture, but films and everything in general, because disfigurement and mental instability were kind of the twins of World War I, the aftermath.
And also the power, how power can be corrupting and used to control people as opposed to for friendly purposes. So it's really a terrific mixture of things.
Well, in here, the tormented ghost of Cyrus West, Paul Linney does not dispute the idea that there could be supernatural manifestations and activity in this house, judging by this fabulous shot of the
But
billowing
look at what kind of
drapes.
house he's living in.
Well, it's certainly not a Ramada Inn at this point. This is a spooky house that, kind of like the House of Usher, has malevolent spirits within it. He never dispels that. All of the copycat movies of the haunted house comedy series that would follow this always dispelled the supernatural. Paul Linney doesn't do that.
And of course, we're dealing with a will being read, so right away you're up front. It's all about it's from
Greed.
death
Yeah.
and greed.
Yes.
And so you've got these and the shadows everywhere, and it's just an amazing setting of the tone for what's to come. And of course, that's what's interesting with silent films. You know, the films were designed. They didn't have ratings or anything. The whole family could go. So a horror film was kind of an unusual thing and didn't really happen that often because you were having to make films for the largest denomination of people. So filmmakers were a little skittish about doing anything too gruesome or anything too overt. And yet at the same time, just like jumping out at Halloween in a costume, people love to be scared as long as they know they're okay afterwards, really quickly.
Well, this movie was scary.
Yes.
Because the movies that were before this, things like Haunted Spooks with Harold Lloyd in 1920, and the old D.W. Griffith, One Exciting Night, 1922, and then afterwards, Seven Footprints to Satan, 29, and The Bat Whispers. And, of course, Waxworks from Germany, which is what brought Paul Lenny to everyone's attention. Those movies relied heavily on comedy. But with Paul Lenny, he would get comedic. There's actually an actor in here who just is doing a Harold Lloyd impersonation.
Well, and he was in Harold Lloyd movies. So
Well, and he learned, didn't he? Yes.
And at the same time, it's dealing in stereotypes like this woman. There's no doubt that she's someone to be careful of.
Martha Mattox.
Yes.
This was Martha. She specialized in harridans.
Yeah. Yes.
But the wonderful thing about Martha here, who died in 1933, is that this was her biggest and best role. And in subsequent films, her character would be played by Gail Sondergaard.
She's only 47 here, too, by the way, and so she looks like she's
100. She did one of my favorite movies from the early 30s, Murder by the Clock with Lillian Tasman, and The Monster Walks, which is kind of a snooze fest. But she did specialize in these old dark house things. She's also in Huckleberry Finn. But, usually in very small roles.
Of course.
But in this, she excels.
Without a doubt, and she's just let in Tully Marshall, who was an equally recognizable character actor who worked for decades because he was really great for, kind of a wide variety of very strong character roles.
Well, Tully Marshall did what's an unforgettable moment for me in Erich von Stroheim's The Merry Widow.
Yes.
He gets the wedding night with Mae Murray, where he dies before he can consummate, or you get my drift. The marriage night is only pure von Stroheim. But Tully Marshall specialized in playing perverse and truly wicked characters.
Yes. And a really terrific guy. Very dependable as an actor for when people wanted certain
kind of like Samuel S. Hines would be in the late 30s and 40s. Everyone is lit in this in a very specific way. There's not one moment you don't realize you're in a mystery, you're in a horror film.
And of course, you don't know who to trust here because she's looking so carefully at the combination, and you see a moth come out of the safe, which supposedly hasn't been opened. It's like, uh-oh, who's doing what to whom here?
Well, the fact that the housekeeper, whose name Mammy, which is really unusual because this woman's never been married, and she has no children, except the ghosts, you see. It's never dispelled that she may be listening to spirits from another world.
With the wax ceiling and everything, of course.
Well, Lenny's not afraid to move his camera around.
No.
If you notice in this movie, every single character gets close-ups, gets reveals, the camera tilts. And when this first was being cut, everyone in Hollywood was like, you got to check out this Paul Lenny. He's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, and he had already made an impression on Carl Laemmle from Waxworks, and also from his prologues. He was designing and staging prologues before the theater shows in Germany, and theoretically, I believe he did a couple for Laemmle when he first came to New York. But that's an area that most people don't even know about. But it's definitely a very specific area of talent. And so Laemmle was impressed by his visualization and by his establishment of mood. And a lot of the other German directors had come over to other studios, like Murnau to Fox, and a lot of
Lubitsch went to Paramount.
Yeah, after trying to work with Mary Pickford, and so it was the talent that Laemmle could afford at that time, because Universal was really a Western studio that made a lot of Westerns and
Tom
a lot
Mix
of cheap
was
comedies.
Like their big
Yes.
star.
And they had Reginald Denny comedies and things like that. But they were all very inexpensive and very quickies. But they would do specials. They would call them Jewel productions.
And Super Jewel.
Yes, and that was things like The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Or Man Who Laughs.
Later, yes. And then also Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney. And both of those films, with Lon Chaney, really led the path to this film, and especially to The Man Who Laughs, because it was a film that would have been perfect for Lon Chaney. But he had moved to MGM by that time, which had just started in 24. So not only did they lose Lon Chaney, but they lost Irving Thalberg, who was a producer at Universal when he was just a kid, literally 19, 20 years old. So
kind of like the enfant terrible.
Exactly.
The actor that was introduced here is Arthur Edmund Corot, who graced a lot of movies in different capacities. Here he's got the role that I think went to, in the remake in 39, the Bob Hope remake. I think it went not to Douglas Montgomery, but John Beale. But in any case, he was in Michael Curtiz's The Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Also, the original Phantom of the Opera.
And the original Phantom of the Opera, too. His role in this on Broadway was played by the playwright, John Willard, who also was an actor, apparently. And here's a little comic relief in a kind of Chester Conklin. If that isn't Chester Conklin, I don't think it is. Who, of course, like in Dracula, ghosts will not drop them off at the front door.
This is Gertrude Astor, who was the very first actress that was signed by Universal in 1915, and she was known for kind of the sexier but more lascivious, women. And then with her is, of all people, Flora Finch, who started acting in 1909 with Vitagraph with John Bunny comedies, and had her own comedy label as well. And she's only 60 here, and she'd already been making films as an old lady for more than 15 years. So it's very interesting to see her coming up with this, extremely
jittery kind of Zazu Pitts.
And she continued to work till she died at 72. But really, the beginnings of film acting right there.
The shadows that every character in this casts on the wall, especially the housekeeper, kind of is very much like in Nosferatu, and of course Coppola's Dracula picked up all of those. And there's the cat
in
again.
the driveway.
And there's the role that probably would have been Bob Hope's in the remake. But he's so Harold Lloyd in this that he mistakes the tire going out for a pistol going off. So he's he's an unlikely hero in a way.
Right.
But I suppose this would be, and this doesn't always work. I think his performance is one of the weaker ones in this because he is such a milquetoast in a way. But yet, through the thing, he manages to convey a bit of heroic, enough to make Laura LaPlante kind of gravitate to him in a way.
Right.
But everyone else in it she's afraid of them, because they're all greedy cats.
Well, and very strange people.
You see, he's insisting that he was shot at,
right.
which, And he's terrified of the house. Well, he should be, because Mammy's a pretty formidable character. But you never get a sense that she's a normal domestic whatsoever. And,
No.
they completely ignore what she's been doing in this creepy, cobweb-ridden house for 20 years with no one coming to a door that's filled with cobwebs.
It's just amazing, and it's the same to hear you of all this sound being evidenced by the way it's described with words. We're getting to know all the various cast members here, and then the obvious problem is going to be figuring out, well, who's doing what, who's maneuvering. So see if you can guess as the film goes along.
Well, this Gothic style that Lenny is so comfortable with. I mean, I look at this movie now, Randy, like it's a cornerstone of the beginning of Universal's horror period.
Definitely.
Which I was aware of, but not to the extent that I am now that I've been looking at it, because this continued with Universal into the 60s.
Yes. But they had times when they tried to get away from it too, when the studio ownership changed. But what's happening here is this is 1927, and this came out just a few weeks after the jazz singer had rocked everybody with the idea of sound on film. So it hadn't really sunk into a lot of Hollywood yet how quickly things were going to need to change. But literally within 2 years, sound production was almost gone. Now, Universal was the last to completely change over because, again, they made films for less money, and therefore they would be rented by, small towns and places that couldn't afford high rental fees for the more glamorous pictures. And Universal didn't own any theaters of their own, whereas MGM and Paramount and even Warner Brothers had their own theaters, so they were guaranteed having a place to screen things. So Universal took a long time to change over to sound because there were still people who hadn't paid for sound change yet. On the other hand, they knew that the writing was on the wall, and so they had to begin. And so they did it piecemeal, and they came up with a way, even with what would be a sound remake of this movie called The Cat Creeps, was The Cat and the Canary. They would then simultaneously make a sound version, which would be in other languages,
like
including
Spanish, yeah.
Yes, and the guy who came up with that was one of the executives who helped to fill the gap when Irving Thalberg left, by the name of Paul Kohner. And it was Paul who came up with the idea of making the different language versions. And it was also Paul who suggested The Man Who Laughs. Originally, they had hoped to get Chaney, but they couldn't really afford him to break away from MGM anymore. And so Conrad Veidt came into play with that film, and Paul Lenny ended up directing it. Paul had worked with Conrad Veidt in Germany. So there was, again, this kind of familial sense to some of these changeovers. Simultaneously to this, of course, Carl Laemmle was realizing that, he was not a young man anymore because he was, in his 40s when he started back in the Nickelodeon era. And he was grooming his son, Carl Laemmle Jr., to help, take the transition. And Junior was the one who really kind of got interested in doing higher class, bigger budget films, but also, doing things like, horror films and things that were something that they had some, people like Paul Lenny and like, some of their cameramen who really understood how to do this kind of, atmospheric film. So it was all in transition, even though it was also literally in the family. Lemley was known for hiring a lot of relatives, but he also, knew when he needed new talent and would bring people in.
Well, Junior was the one that talked his father into doing All Quiet on the Western Front, which made a lot of money. But the Phantom really made Carl Sr. realize that in his frequent trips to Germany, he knew that, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Waxworks, all these movies, The Student of Prague, there was German horror, German expressionism, German folk tales. He was fueled by them. And so it was easy to see Universal step up. And this movie cemented that. The scene we saw before with the clocks is interesting because, once again, that clock had not chimed for 20 years. And right at the beginning of the reading of the will, it chimes. And Lenny does that amazing thing by showing the inside of the clock and all that. This reading of the will, too, is done more like a seance than the reading of a will. So there's always a reference to the dead or corpses.
And that lens distortion they just did, you're seeing some visual indications that not all is normal here. It's quite amazing.
Well, each character has their own eccentricities.
Yeah.
And none of them are to be trusted, except maybe Harold Lloyd.
Yeah.
Laura LaPlante she's a charming addition to Universal's jewels, their super jewel. And this was considered a jewel. Man Who Laughs was a super jewel. And that just indicated bigger budgets, I think.
Yeah, she was their biggest female star that they had at the time. They didn't have that many. And she had started out literally as a kid needing to raise money for her family because her father divorced her mother. Her mother was having trouble making ends meet. And so she ended up needing to go out. She started getting jobs as an extra in films and then working her way up in order to help feed her family. And, Universal was a place that, again, made lots of Westerns. She didn't know how to ride a horse, but she faked it. And, she just was like, whatever I need to do to get the part. And so she had a very practical approach to acting and, literally learned on the set. She didn't have an education or training to do it. But she also had a really good look, especially for the 20s. And you can see that hairstyle fits right into 20s glamour.
Does she remind you a little of Marion Davies?
Oh, without a doubt. And there was a real sense of looking for that beauty norm, and blonde definitely especially short-haired blondes had a very specific way of being glamorous and at the same time poised. So it's really nice to see her in this film. And the fact that she's in this film is an estimation of her stature at the studio at this time, that she'd worked her way up.
And she's top billed. She's the star. I found a quote from her, Randy, that is from this period. They asked her, because she was being interviewed at the time, and she said, what's special about the silent films was the pantomime you had to get over to the audience without saying the words. And she said the scripts we got actually had dialogue. We didn't learn the dialogue, but we got the idea of what we were saying. And she said at the time of The Cat and the Canary, my salary was $3,500 a week at Universal. The fact that I finally sunk into me was like a paralyzing realization.
Mm-hmm.
So she was a highly paid, very prominent silent screen star at this time.
And she was versatile. She was in comedies with Reginald Denny, like Skinner's Dress Suit. She also had some dramatic roles, like in Smoldering Fires or Butterfly. And the real problem with Laura LaPlante now is that so many of her films don't exist. In the 40s, when Universal was taken over and had changed ownership yet again, they needed space. So they threw out a lot of the negatives of silent films, saying, we're never going to be able to do anything with this. They didn't have the sense of, history that, anybody else might. And at the same time, the few things that did survive, like this film, have survived mostly because there were prints in archives or some other collector or whatever. So we're really lucky to be able to have some of these films, and some of them, like this, are being restored after many years of not being seen at all. And it's great to see this looking so good. It's great to see it, complete, and to be able to really enjoy it for what it was, not what it, has become.
This sequence where Mammy takes the painting, which
Yes.
they don't explain why it came off the wall when it did. That could have been the ghost of Cyrus West. But if you noticed, as the audiences did at the time, when her face goes into total darkness, she assumes a kind of spectral figure. That camera work on her, when the painting falls, she goes to collect it. For 1 minute, she's completely enveloped in darkness and takes on the aspects of something rather demonic. And then she says to all of them that this is an omen. When a painting falls on its own like this, someone is going to die, which of course is going to happen in a few minutes. A movie like this, actually, that I noticed, requires a second viewing to really appreciate all the little embellishments that Paul Linney did.
Well, and it also makes her clearly devoted to that painting and the person that it was painted of, and you don't know where her loyalties lie or even what her motives are. So again, it throws mystery on so many levels. It's just terrific.
Well, from the beginning, we don't know if Cyrus West was poisoned or if he died of a heart attack for being frightened.
Or if he might still be alive and come back.
She says he's well, and she often says throughout this movie, when she's asked how she could be there alone, she said, well, I'm not really alone.
There you go. So is he alive, or is his spirit alive? What's actually happening?
Well, the house appears to have many spirits.
Yes.
If you look at that hallway and the different rooms. And of course, like with most old dark house movies, there are catacombs and labyrinths and secret panels, all of which has been done before. I was fascinated by the fact that Lenny had done a Charlie Chan.
Yes.
The Chinese parrot.
Which is one of the 4 films that he made in the United States that doesn't exist anymore. And, all that you have to gather from it are some stills that exist to show you what it may have looked like. And they don't have the same kind of depth that a lot of his, even the stills of Cat and the Canary and the other films that he made don't necessarily have the same, because of movement and because of framing changing, it doesn't have the same impact that his visuals had in the movies. So it's hard to know whether that. It also is interesting because even though it was a Charlie Chan film, he was more of a supporting character in
Well,
it.
he's played by Sojin.
By a Japanese.
But Sojin
actor,
is a character that William Marsden, this famous photographer, used a lot in things like Night of, I guess the thing that introduced one of Karloff's early films, Night of... The Unholy Night, and also Thief of Baghdad. Sojin he had a very strange face, very skeletal. The chairs in this all look like little cathedral. It's a very, every inch of this movie is to remind you that you're in an unearthly... The chairs are covered like shrouds.
It extends the funereal aspects of the whole thing.
Well, in World War I being a giant graveyard.
Yes.
It was early in that J'accuse came out, where the undead of World War I came back to avenge themselves. And what's considered one of the scariest moments in cinema. See, the lunatic, once again, the mental instability along with the disfigurement is always there.
It's also interesting as far as Laura LaPlante is concerned that she went to England to make some films after leaving Universal in 1930, made some films there. Came back to the States. She just never found her way. She made a few sound films and took a few small roles. but she kind of she ended up marrying well and doing okay and raising a family, so she spent time with that. But she ended up not having the memory of a lot of fans because of having a longer career, even though she'd been at Universal, since the teens. It was really a shame that she isn't better known, because she's quite good in this film. And it's not easy to be in a horror film and you feel like you're being authentic, because you're responding to a lot of things.
Well, she repeated this performance a bit
Yes.
in Lenny's very last movie before his untimely death, which is The Last Warning, which is an old dark house movie set in a theater with a lot of the same tropes that are in this.
Yes.
But as I told you earlier when we were discussing this before the taping, it doesn't really hold up as much, in my opinion.
Right.
Even though it's got some great things in it.
I think that they were trying to get Lenny to crank things out and move faster, and I think you need time to allow some of these things to gestate. And obviously, The Man Who Laughs took a lot out of him, because I think he really poured his heart and soul into that and really enjoyed it.
Well, that had lots of retakes and
Yes.
a lot of work done on it. One of the things about Lenny and his camera, going back to the painting and everything, this is rare in a movie of this period, that the point of view of the audience has shifted. We look at it from the painting's point of view, or from the killer's point of view. This would be copied years and years afterwards.
Sure.
But in this, it's all these things were innovative. The montages and the superimposing one image on another, like with the door and the people that are coming to the house. And as we'll see later on, in the big set piece for this, of course, it takes place in her bedroom.
Right.
After the things calm down a little. This is also a famous moment where Crosby is dispatched to the netherworld by the cat, or what we think is the cat. This is copied almost frame for frame in the 1939 version, where George Zucco, another wonderful character actor of the period, is playing Crosby.
Here we have the whole plot being really set up now to know that there's going to be some contest between the person who's named in the will and the person who would succeed that person. In the meantime, you have this moving bookcase with a hand coming out of it.
Well, and the fact, the last thing he imparts to her, not the name of the successor, but if she's deemed insane,
right,
then, it goes to the unnamed person. And you've got this man running around from the asylum who's just holding on to a straitjacket. And he leaves the impression, well, is there someone that's going to fit this before I leave, meaning her?
And of course, in the whole setup of all the various characters, she seems the most sane of all.
I know that. I mean, I wouldn't certify any of those, including our Harold Lloyd hero.
Yes, yes.
I love those chairs, those Gothic. Well, the set design and
Everything.
Camera work, it's all, he was really a master of this. And
of
this
course,
looks so good, this film.
Even though it's been copied, dozens and dozens of times, it's still very effective because it's done so well.
Well, isn't it important now to mention that The Cat Creeps, which was the 1930 remake of this, is lost?
Yes, both the English and other language versions. So, and what's really interesting, it was the one example where there's a photograph that exists that a friend of mine has, who's really interested in this, doing studies on it. It has a picture of the two casts from the Spanish and English version, and that's very rare because they shot one in the evening and one in the
well, they did that
daytime.
with Dracula.
Yeah, and
with Lupita Tovar,
who was also in The Cat Creeps,
and Antonio Marino was in The Cat Creeps, and Carlos Villarreal was Dracula.
Yes.
but it's not as good as the Browning only because of the cast.
Yes.
You know, a lot of newer film historians will compare the Draculas, and Paul Linney would have probably directed Dracula with Veidt, for all we know.
Yes.
He would have, had he lived.
Yes.
But the thing is, yes, the camera's more fluid in the Spanish Dracula, but it can't compensate for the performances.
Yes, and Veidt was having trouble because he didn't speak English very well, so he didn't feel he was ready for a sound film. And at the same time, with this film, Paul Linney had the screenwriter who had written the adaptation helping him with his German and the translation because it was all new to him as well. So, you know, when you get into talkies, you really need to know what everybody's saying and the communication.
And he excelled so well when he finally did.
Yes.
Well, you know, John Barrymore brought Veidt to Hollywood to be in The Beloved Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got off the train, their first meeting, Barrymore was saying, well, you know, I'm known for seducing the women with all my athletics. And Veidt looks at him and says, I just use my face. And what a face he had.
Right. And of course, with this, language problem that you're talking about with sound and the Cat Creeps, Dracula and Cat Creeps both starred Lupita Tovar, and she ended up marrying Paul Kohner, who was, again, the producer. They didn't call them producers because Carl Laemmle Presents was the producer. But they had supervisor and all kinds of different things, and he was trying to advance himself, and one of the ways that he advanced himself was that whole idea of having separate languages and bringing Lupita Tovar in as the talent. And, of course, if you see that version of Dracula, there's a lot more, it's a lot sexier in the way it's staged.
The brides are very sexy. Lupita Tovar doesn't wear a bra.
And you can get away with that.
We both got to meet her.
Yes.
I mean, she lived to be almost 100, if not 100.
Over 100.
What a charming woman she was.
Yes, very classy. Very classy.
And her daughter, Susan Kohner, became an actress.
At Universal with Imitation of Life,
being
one of her big films.
Well, you met Laura LaPlante as well. You should.
Yes,
this would be
I
a
did.
good moment to talk about. You just met everybody.
No,
Randy.
not everybody. I met everybody that you didn't.
Yeah, right.
But,
between the two of us, we've met everybody.
And yes, I did meet Laura. She was out at the Motion Picture Country House at the time. She died when she was 91 in 1996. And we ran a silent film out there, Smoldering Fires, which she had appeared in. And she hadn't seen it. At that time, she was already, she had been suffering for many years from Alzheimer's. And so when the film came on, she was really engaged in it and really pleased to see it. But you could also see that it was really very emotional for her to watch it. She couldn't really speak very well and communicate. But it was very touching to see her respond to the film the way she did. It was sad, but at the same time, even in the earlier years, and as early as 1977, when Kevin Brownlow tried to, the godfather of silent film history, who's involved with this photoplay productions version that we're looking at here, he met her and tried to get her to be part of his Hollywood documentary series. He also interviewed her husband, Irving Asher, at the time. But she did not want to be any part of the interviews because she felt that she couldn't remember, and she could remember what dress she wore and things like that.
Isn't that funny?
But she couldn't really remember anything about the making of the films. And I think there was also some, not beyond the hesitation of memory, I think she was worried that people wouldn't care about the films or wouldn't know about them. So she had created a new life for herself and wanted to live it that way. But look how gorgeous she is, just amazing. And again, she can handle the intensity of a horror film, and at the same time, like I said, she was in comedy. She ended up being in the musical version of Showboat. They replaced her voice, that she was surprised when they did that for the 1929 version.
They did it to Ava Gardner.
Yeah,
too, so
exactly.
They tend to hire people and then you can't sing.
Yes. But she was very popular and, could basically handle just about anything, Westerns, whatever. And certainly she enjoyed being a part of the Universal family until that family, changed with coming of sound. The rules started to change.
Well, I was going to mention you noticed when the asylum keeper was there, he was dangling his straitjacket.
Yes.
That is, I don't know if that's in the 39 version as well. It's interesting to me, having just watched it the other day, how much the 1939 version took a lot of Lenny's things and just embellished it a little, but all of the plot points are from this one.
Mm-hmm. Look, this is interesting too. This camera just dipping and changing ever so slightly. That was very rare.
Keeping the audience off balance.
Yeah, it was very rare for that kind of camera movement to be happening at this time. And the shadow is so prominent. It's just great.
Well, at one point I read that in the corridor sequences and some of the long shots where people are full figure, they would dig holes to put lights in. That Lenny decided, I want to light all this from the floor.
Right.
Which most horror films, I know one actress said, I don't like to do horror films because they light you from the floor, which shows all of your crow's feet and all that, laugh lines and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in a horror film, the way he lit this and the way the camera is fluid, off kilter, everything about this is to make you uneasy because nothing is as it seems. I don't think you can say this about any of the other movies that this inspired that have comedy relief.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in this could be a ghoul at some point.
Mm-hmm. Look at the lighting them with flashlights again from underneath. It's fantastic.
Well, Arthur Edmund Carew.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. He's quite good in The Phantom of the Opera, too.
Yeah. The cinematographers in the silent era obviously had to be good because that's what they had to work with was the image. So they had a lot of control and a lot of influence. And that was one thing that everybody was looking at German films, especially starting with Dr. Caligari and then, of course, Nosferatu and The Last Laugh and many others. People in the States were paying a lot of attention to what they were doing because it was so unique and so different and could work so well in movies.
Well, the fact that he naturalized the German expressionism into a Hollywood kind of staple. I mean, this people copied this for forever, even into World War II, of course, which again, Germany would be a part. But now there was a German and an American version of this movie. And from what I've read, because I haven't seen the German cut of this,
right?
But apparently the Americans got the better.
Always, there
were different. It wasn't like there was a different plot point at any point, but there were different camera angles. Apparently,
sometimes there would be. I mean, again, they would shoot with two cameras usually, and they'd have them side by side, so each one would end up looking slightly different. In fact, there have been cases where you can actually make a 3D image if you get those two cameras together.
They're doing that now.
Yeah,
they're doing that now.
The real interesting part is that, for instance, with the front page, they decided to cut entirely different versions. So the version that ended up existing in Europe had entirely different scenes that had been staged entirely different ways. And it wasn't even known that had happened until the original American version was found in Howard Hughes's collection. And it was timed much more punchier. And even some of the language had been changed with American colloquialisms in the American version and other things, other references in the European version. So there was a lot of freedom with the editor to cut it however they wanted. And whatever they felt was the best surviving take if they had one camera that didn't work
to that end, according to Christopher Bird, the Universal editing team, supervised by Lloyd Nosler, took the best of Lenny's takes to create a flowing, smooth experience. In the American release print, marked by careful action cuts and efficient matches on action in line with Lenny's rhythmic cues, in the European version, by contrast, certain long shots are held for just a few frames too long, and at least one close-up shot starts 2 seconds too early, leading to a far different experience and a much less carefully timed film. So that's the reason they said that the European version is inferior
Yep.
to the American, and that kind of explains what you were talking about there.
So it's interesting.
A whole house shrouded in all of these things.
Come and sleep in my room. Oh my goodness.
Well, this leads to probably the only quasi, shall I say, erotic moment in this movie. There is no eroticism. And of course, if he weren't so Harold Lloyd, it might have been even more disturbing. But our hero hides under the bed. Such a hero. He's hiding under the bed. And there's a marvelous camera trick here. But the ladies, I don't know why we'd want to watch, Miss Thing undress here, but the two ladies begin to disrobe while he's under the bed. And this is kind of a risque moment for 1927.
Definitely.
But in Germany, this was old hat.
Of course.
But once again, you get, I imagine, I'm trying to think of this more like, because what was borrowed now? Well, Roland West used the headlights of cars for an ominous, like two burning eyes in the night. But with this, because he's wearing those Harold Lloyd shades, you get a camera move here, which we'll see in a moment, which is a bit, once again, even in moments that are supposed to either be lighthearted or completely not menacing, there is still a malevolent moment, because Lenny is not going to let up. He's not going to let you think that this is a comedy. I don't think of this as a comedy. I think of The Last Warning as a bit more of a comedy, because you have a kind of people chasing each other around the theater. But see, here we go. Now, this is there's a little von Sternberg here, or maybe a little von Stroheim, or someone with a von,
Yes.
Now, you look how modest he is. This is so 1927. I can't look. They're naked. Oh, yes, I can. Except, of all the two women to have in there, oh, well.
But it's also being played at the same time where there's this whole diversion going on, and you've also got a cross-cutting with Laura LaPlante, so you don't know if something is suddenly going to shift very quickly.
Exactly. Everyone is kept jittery. Even the dialogue credits are, you don't know when they're going to get distorted. I think that moment is coming up where he's under the bed, and she said, I always look under the bed, of all people, nothing under there for her.
Never found anything yet.
No, she never will either, but there you go. She's actually getting lucky here, because this ain't going to happen again. But there you go. Isn't that fabulous?
Too perfect.
Well, that's it. This is the highlight of her life. She hasn't had that's the biggest thrill this woman's had in 40 years. And, the acting, there is a style of acting that is so, it's the way silent films were. This has less of it than a lot. I don't know quite how to explain it. Maybe you can, because you're so much more aware of silent movies than I am. But isn't this a more modern take on silent film acting than you usually get?
Definitely. They definitely have gone very silent film as far as the casting is concerned. It's very obvious who these characters are supposed to be and what you're supposed to think of them. But at the same time, there's a much subtler sense of expression. Obviously, the scares bring out screams and bring out, shock, and the laughs bring out, and even the sexiness is it's very clear who the really sexy one is and who the good girl is and who the old lady is.
Well, the old lady's got a mouth on her,
exactly.
because the card for her was like, she's swearing. It's great. I don't see that in any other silent movie of this period.
There were a lot. Especially in films that were dramatic. Sunrise with Murnau directing it has the same kind of evocative visuals with all kinds of shadows and all kinds of dramatic, murder it's lurking in the darkness. And at the same time, it's, there's very, very subtle acting and extremely, small but very clear as to what's going on.
Well, Murnau and Lenny both share the same interest in the macabre.
Yeah.
And this is the beginning of what is a set piece in any version of Cat and the Canary, which is her discovery of the West diamonds. And she decides to wear them, to go to bed. Which is more like something Mae West would do than Laura LaPlante. There's a third version of this, which is rather mediocre, that was done in the 60s. That was set in an English manner.
She did inherit them after all.
They're hers, yes. She gets them back, too. But the last version of The Cat and the Canary, which is set in an old house, they try and update it in a more Agatha Christie way. And I think it's Carol Lynley that plays the Laura LaPlante role. And, but it follows the same basic story. Instead of title credits, they actually have a bird in a cage being stalked by a real cat. And then to keep it in the sleaze of that period, you see the cat strangled and hanging from a tree at one point. And that's their way of introducing the Cat and the Canary. No subtlety, no style.
Yeah. For me, this film gets points by being the first version of this because it's, it feels fresh and new, even though it's a thing you've seen before. But because it's done in the silent era, it's got a real kind of traditional feel to it that I like a lot.
Well, you get so many close-ups and in different kind of convoluted ways.
Right.
I think that's why the actress here, our Martha, is getting such a start. I mean, she really is one of the most interesting characters in this.
Without a doubt, especially when she goes down that hallway. It just like is such a great visual. It sets the tone for the entire film.
Now here we have the moment that you see. This is the most reproduced photo from The Cat and the Canary. And it's taken right out of Nosferatu. With no apologies, except, of course, the hand in both this and the Bob Hope version is kind of a weircat kind of thing, which is you only see weircats. The only other time I can think of is in a really, really mundane movie called The Catman of Paris that was done at Republic in the late 40s, where you have a kind of the same kind of makeup that Henry Hall had in The Werewolf of London.
And this hand is taking its sweet time.
Anyone else, whether you're asleep or not, you always, it can instinctively, but they're the shadows. Very Nosferatu. Give me that. Oh, wow. I love the credits for this.
And the zooming in when she's, or trucking in rather, when she's setting up, it's going out of focus. It's a great combination. That makes it even more unexpected.
I think this fellow's performance as Paul, the character of Paul, I think that when Bob Hope looked at this, he probably saw where he could take his, being reluctant to be the hero, but a little more subtle. Because the acting styles, of course, were different.
Yeah. He had been acting for quite a while and at the same time got divorced about shortly around this film, and his career kind of took a hit from the publicity he got on his divorce because he didn't pay child support and things like that. So he ended up doing mostly very small parts after this. So this is one of his larger roles. Creighton Hale.
Well, everyone manages to have a moment in this, which is good because when I looked at The Last Warning, John Bowles, ages, and Laura LaPlante pretty much looks glamorous through the whole thing. But you could just tell where they were trying to get back to the energy of this. And the script wasn't there. But I can't imagine what this was like on the stage. It must have had certain moments the audience jumped at. Maybe
Oh, without a doubt. What's great about The Last Warning, though, for me, is it's got the original Phantom sets in it. So you have just these incredible, uses of a very familiar, that literally that set sat there until into the 2000s.
Well, it was used in The Raven.
Yes.
And a few other movies.
And
even the remake with Claude Rains had it, the original Phantom set.
It's a great set, and they dismantled it because they needed to replace the stage. It was an old silent stage, really, that had been rehabilitated for sound, and so they put some of the sets in boxes, and it still exists, but at the same time, it used to sit there for decades, and you could see it if you knew what you were looking for.
Well,
when you're on
wasn't
the
the
tour.
other set piece at Universal the Court of Miracles? Didn't that from the Hunchback?
Yes.
That just got removed recently, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So many of that's one of the Los Angeles's problems is everybody sees the whole city as sets and sees it very temporary, so things get changed and moved very quickly here. I love this.
This was considered. This was a shock.
Detail.
Oh, well, there he goes right into the camera.
Yeah.
And done. This was all, but it started here.
Right. Right.
Even William Castle in the 50s borrowed this for House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts. So these things didn't get old.
No.
Well, they got old, but they still did them.
Oh, I'm sure you see it still.
They try to drive her crazy, but, the audience is pulling for her, which is kind of a tribute to Laura LaPlante's, her kind of innocence that she conveys. She's very kind of innocent in this, which is kind of what you have to be a heroine in an old dark house film.
The guy who's trying to revive her there is Forrest Stanley, who was in lots of silent films and worked quite a bit with Marion Davies and also DeMille. And he passed away at 42. Or he didn't pass away at 42. He's only 42 here. He lived until 1969 and 84. But he appeared in films throughout. He changed quite a bit into more of a character actor as he got a little plumper. But this is at the handsome male lead phase.
How does this fare with the versions of the Bat, which is the closest thing the Cat and the Canary had as a competition, if it would be that way, or a film that followed a lot of the plot points the same?
I think the real great thing about this film, as opposed to the Bat, is the Bat. This is shot much closer to the actors. You have a lot more space, it feels like more of a play in some of the ways that it's shot. It has the lighting, it has the sets, and it has this guy running around in a bat outfit that you don't know what's going on.
Right.
But it feels looser, and I think this one has a very nice, tight visual style that is a real plus for the effectiveness of it.
It takes full advantage of the Gothic atmosphere and the Germanic.
I mean, look, that hallway is just perfect.
Perfect. The Bat's too modern. And I remember when they had the big screening of the 70 millimeter version of Roland West the Bat, everyone was kind of flipping out over the miniature cars and the way the camera was going through the forest to the house. But the camera work was never as fluid as this.
Right. And
it was more of a gimmick in the Roland West movie.
And in those miniatures, they're really trying to be fairly realistic, whereas this when they cut to that version of the exterior, it's not real, and at the same time, the response is much more effective because it's so spooky that, you really go, it's like you jump into a storybook,
Yeah, well, that storybook atmosphere is very Germanic, because they were steeped in fairy tales.
Sure.
With the bat with Roland West, you got Chester Morris finally say, after I've paid a visit to your cheap lockup, there's no jail that can hold the bat.
Yeah, but then you've got, just like in The Man Who Laughs, where you have the inspiration for the Joker, with the bat, you have the inspiration for Batman. So,
well, you and I discussed the idea that there was a rather grotesque side story to both The Phantom of the Opera and The Man Who Laughs, whereas both characters, when they were children, were disfigured by gypsies with surgical, they were operated on, which is not really dwelled on, probably for good reason, in either version.
Well, when I was in college and programming for the, campus film program, I saw the Universal catalog, which had the grinning picture of Conrad Veidt from The Man Who Laughs. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this movie, but we're playing it. so that was my first time.
I mean, once again, Paul Linney, that is his most accomplished movie.
Yes.
And one that was openly admired by James Whale, who gave it the ultimate comment saying, I'd love to have directed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a shame that Lenny died at 44, shortly after about a year after he had finished Last Warning. He was again thinking of, or being talked about for Dracula.
Randy, it's so important to go to the dentist.
Yeah.
I cannot enforce more.
I had never heard of anyone dying of, having an abscess.
Well, he had an infected tooth, and then he said it got better, and then it caused blood poisoning.
Well, go to the dentist, I guess, is the answer. But for him to die at 44, he only made 4 American films. He had a career that he established in Germany that was equally, fantastic, including his little animated crossword puzzles that he did, which are just among the strangest things I've ever seen.
Oh, my.
But the great part of it is, or the sad part of it is, rather, that dying at 44 like that, when he was at Universal, it would have been, he never made a sound picture. It would have been great to see what he would have done with sound and what he would have done with the Universal horror films. And but the same thing happened with Murnau. Murnau
exactly after Taboo, right?
He made one sound film, but unfortunately, he died. He was only 42, and he had made Sunrise and Four Devils, another film that's lost, just like Lenny's The Chinese Parrot. They each had 4 films they made in the States, and they loved working with the crews and with the money that was available in the States at the studios. And then, of course, not only did both of them die, but then the Depression hit and changed everything as well.
Yes.
So it was a really sad thing. If Murnau and Lenny had lived into their 60s at least, it would have been very interesting to see what their careers would have offered and what pathways they could have
well, yes,
made for people.
And sometimes the directors that did live, particularly James Whale, his output didn't go into the 40s.
No.
And yet he was one of the best of his at Universal after Lenny. But once again, circumstance.
Yep.
And I think there's always a certain amount of luck in show business that isn't something you can predetermine.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's the same thing with Junior Limley. I mean, he gets really ragged on because, his dad ended up having to sell the studio. They made some bad business decisions about Showboat, even though it ended up being a hit. They didn't save the studio in time. It was really sad that because he made All Quiet on the Western Front, he won an Oscar for Universal, which I don't think anybody in Hollywood would have ever predicted that.
Right.
And at the same time, it was a huge hit, still a very influential film. Again, brought in Louis Milestone, a great director, who had been working with Howard Hughes, of all people. So it's very interesting to think of what timing and what the possibilities are, and where people get lucky and where their luck runs out. Because the Junior was doing very interesting films, really taking Universal to a new place with not only the horror films, but doing things like King of Jazz and some really experimental and wild films.
Well, they did two versions of King of Jazz. They did one in Hungarian, of all things.
But
here we have Lucian Littlefield dressed almost like Dr. Caligari, the Werner Klaus character. And this is the kind of role that Gustav von Seifertitz would play as well. You have certain character actors that just lend themselves to these kind of grotesque and great fun, you know. But he's kind of a fake doctor, isn't he?
Well, he's only 32 here, so he's got some makeup going on.
32 going on 62.
Yeah. and he was in a lot of comedies and other films too. So
was this one of his rather rare forays into this villainous kind of?
I think so.
The glasses help a lot, but his examination of what makes you nervous tonight. Look at him; he looks like a. It's once again hands of Orlok a little.
Well, you know? And what would you do if somebody had their hands in your face like that?
Well, I wouldn't go for an examination. I don't think. Somehow I think I'd hold off on that.
Oh my God. A hand came out of the wall. All of this stuff, as you read it, is the perfect thing to say if you want somebody to think you're crazy.
Well, the thing is, he looks more insane than she could ever be. But once again, you get the feeling in this that no one in that house wanted Laura LaPlante to get this money or the house or anything. And the same thing goes true with the 39 version, which is wonderful on a different level. It doesn't deviate too much from all of this, but it's still a scary kind of, you know. In fact, the 39 version was so successful, they did a follow-up movie, if you want to compare it to The Last Warning, called The Ghost Breakers, where Paulette Goddard and Bob Hope go to Cuba, and they deal with zombies. And there, once again, even though it's not remotely like Lenny, you get the idea that zombies really exist in a comedy. So it's interesting when to do like you're about to do Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which to me is the only truly successful horror comedy of that period.
Yes, it's fantastic. And a Universal film, of course.
Well, the last. That was the end of the monster rallies.
Right. Well, they've got the Monster Universe at Epic Universe at Universal in Florida, so the monsters still live on.
Well, you know what? No thanks to Universal as the way they are now, because they've been trying to reboot what they call the Dark Universe. They tried it with Van Helsing. They tried it again with the Wolfman. Actually, the reboot of the Wolfman with Benicio del Toro is not a bad movie. It's actually pretty good. Van Helsing, not so much. But that's not really adhering to the classic movies.
Well, horror has changed so dramatically with the change in what's permissible and I think different audiences go to it too. And, you know, again, like I said earlier, these films were designed so that if kids went to them, they wouldn't be hopefully traumatized. I don't know what I don't know what my reaction would have been if I'd seen this at 8 years old. But at the same time,
well, it'd be interesting to see. Did children actually get to see The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Waxworks or Student of Prague? I mean, in Germany.
I suspect they did. I don't know. I don't think there was. I don't know that parents would necessarily take their kids to that kind of stuff.
Probably not.
But on the other hand, you know, there's plenty of examples of people whose kids got to see The Exorcist and whose kids got to see
Well,
all kinds of films that you're just like.
we're in an era now, Randy, where you can see it on YouTube. You can see it on Tubi.
Exactly.
That's the other thing too. When you look at these movies, when we were talking about World War One and how that traumatized everything.
Right.
You certainly notice it in the horror films from Universal and any other studio from 1915, 16 through 1939. And then World War II came along and.
But I remember as a kid going to the drive-in and seeing previews for some of the William Castle movies that just scared the crap out of me.
And they are very much in tune with the Cat and the Canary. Notice this makeup, which is also used in the version that's lost. The cat creeps. The tusks, the crazy eyeball. Once again, about disfigurement, which of course was on everyone's mind from the war. And insanity, the two results of that war. When you're talking about Conrad Veidt, when he was a tall man, and didn't he, in The Beloved Rogue, he had to play kind of a crippled character. So he would hunch himself down to where when you would cast those Lenny like shadows on him, he looked particularly grotesque and bizarre.
He was fantastic. He was such a good actor, and he was.
You can get a sense of what his Dracula would have been like if you look at the Korda version of The Thief of Baghdad.
I think there's so many roles where he kind of disappears and you don't even think of it as being him. He was somewhat Chaney-esque. I mean, Chaney took it to an even larger extreme with his makeups and things like that. But
when actors were allowed to do their own makeups,
right?
When his son tried to do that in 1 million years BC, they said, "I'm sorry, we have a union."
Yeah, well, that's why Lon Chaney he really invented the whole idea of movie makeup, because the actors were expected to do it themselves, and that's how he got the roles, was by being able to transform himself. You couldn't get away with that after people realized, that they could have specific jobs to do that.
Well, the biggest compliment I've read about the 27 Cat and the Canary is that for the first time, a mystery melodrama has been lifted into the realm of art. I think that's a very appropriate thing to say about this.
Sure.
And the fact that here we are in 2025 and it still holds its own.
Well, but I also think that one of the things that makes it work is I don't think that Lenny was afraid to have the humor or to have...
No.
I think he was really aware of how to balance out a film so that it didn't get too much or too little. I mean, he had a really great sense of balance to keep things moving and also to make it.
Every character in this recoils in horror at things. It's not a boring film.
No. And I love the way they cut away to, things going on outside the house so that you have it not so stage bound, and it's yet totally intrinsic to the story.
Well, he did, as a lot of filmmakers do with stage plays, you do have to open it up at some point.
Sure. But sometimes that just becomes, goofy. And instead, this is, by intercutting like this, it builds the tension. Are they going to make it in time?
Well, it's interesting that directors, European directors of more recent times, like Dario Argento, with Suspiria and Inferno and Deep Red, they adhere to a lot of these. Especially Suspiria is more like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Right.
So, and there's the eye on the floor. You know, there could be a one sheet for that.
It's interesting that we're seeing Creighton Hale here without his glasses, which you keep referring to him as Harold Lloyd. This is where he's transforming into the hero at the end.
Well,
of
he
the movie.
has to do something.
Yeah.
Because he's simply not a hero.
Right.
Hiding under beds and, you know, running for dear life away from danger.
Yeah.
You see, Bob Hope did a little of that.
Sure.
But Bob Hope was a little more modern, you know. And he wasn't under the influence of anyone. Maybe Daffy Duck.
Well, and they were, in that film, they were kind of giving him lines and things so that he had jokes so that people recognized him as Bob Hope. But
Well, his funniest line in the remake of The Cat and the Canary is they said, "Do you believe the dead can come back to life?" And he goes, "What, you mean like Republicans?" And that's still funny today, you know. Well, maybe not so funny, but do you think the Spanish version of The Cat Creeps had this same energy? Maybe.
I have no idea. It had a good cast, and they had
The stills kind of give you an indication it was similar.
Yeah.
But the two scenes that we see the most of is the bedroom scene, of course.
Sure.
There he is. You see the cousin.
Yes.
We realized was, and he was played in the remake by Douglas Montgomery.
And he looked like such a normal guy.
They're always the ones to watch out for.
Yes.
See if there is any insanity. It's not in the West family.
Right.
It's in all the cats. So the cat imagery really holds true.
Well, when you set somebody up by saying you lose your inheritance if you go mad,
you're going to go, geez, I better not go mad.
You're kind of stacking the deck. Oh, my goodness. There he goes. Now he's given the...
She gets her diamonds back, which is...
Wow, he's got scratches on it. He just became much more masculine there, getting injured.
Well, his makeup, you notice, it's you know, the greatest makeup transformation in the early 30s for me, which was supposed to be a comedy, is an obscure movie called Shh, the Octopus.
Oh, my.
Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, you must watch Shh, the Octopus.
Okay.
Because
From the early
it takes
30s?
from the early 30s.
Wow.
It takes place in a lighthouse.
Oh, love it.
And I won't spoil it, but it's
Okay.
very, very spooky.
I appreciate that.
Very spooky indeed. That's a marvelous chair. You know, the chair actually is more of a ghost, and this is clever. You don't really know, could this possibly be a liaison, you know? There's very little eroticism. Well, I say erotic and then she shows up. Well, that's not going to happen.
But she's being respectful. That's amazing.
She's probably going to live it. They never say whether they're going to retain her as a... I mean, where's she going to go?
What would the house be without her?
Well, probably,
be nearly
as Zelda Rubinstein says in Poltergeist, this house is clean, you know. Oh, well. He had to get rid of those glasses if he's going to hit on her, you know.
His rugged youth here.
She's going to taking a chance on love. Well, Randy, thank you so much. This has been really enjoyable watching this with you, and especially someone that appreciates silent movies like you do.
I love this with the repeated request. I love that. It's great.
A good cast is worth repeating.
Exactly.
Don't they do that at one point? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed Randy and I discussing Paul Lenny's The Cat and the Canary.
Thanks for listening.